Hello and welcome to the Coaching Podcast, Coaching for Success in Sport and Business. Your host is Emma Doyle, the energy and high performance under pressure coach who is a world leader in unleashing human potential. Buckle up for this high octane session. Let them have it, coach.
G'day everybody and welcome to the Coaching Podcast. I have the pleasure today of interviewing Grace Calpus, who is a professional coach with the ICF. So both her and I do have our PCC. I wonder if she's also considering, like me, going for her MCC, her Master Certified Coach Professional. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But her business, Between the Words, what a fantastic business name. But she also is a skilled coach supervisor, been working in her own business for the last 6 or 7 years. And I'm excited to explore quite a unique background within not only skydiving, but also this formal education you've had around intuitive training and coaching. So excited to have you on the show. Grace, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks, Em.
And as a fellow Colorado girl, you did throw yourself out of a plane over Longmont, Colorado, everybody.
Yes.
I'm sure I'm not sure how many times. That was nearly an assumption. Coaches listening, do not make assumptions. That quick tip, I threw myself under the bus there. But I love a pattern break question. So the first one I'm going to go for is, if skydiving was an animal, what animal would skydiving be?
Wow. I love that question. You know, I'll just go with the first thing that popped into my head, which is a lion. There's definitely a fierceness to skydiving. I think you have to have some degree of fierceness to get through the fear. That should be present with nearly every skydive anyway. So it's that courageous lion, and fierceness. And I think also there is this sensitive side as well. And the sensitive side, I think, is the underbelly of a fierce community and how much skydivers support each other. We had a skydiver, I think it was 2, maybe 3 years ago now, who did some base jumping, which, by the way, is like where most people die. So not something I'm going to participate in. But he took a jump off a bridge without really taking into account the air density because he was up in the mountains. And his canopy opened basically at the last second. And he broke his ankles and one of his legs, and he ended up getting an infection, and he had one of his legs amputated below the knee. And the community just came together. He didn't have a job, he didn't have insurance, and we all just came together and poured money on him to keep him going. Yeah, and our community does that regularly for people. Yeah.
All right.
So lion.
Yeah, I love that, by the way. We've already got courage in there and lots of awesome things that relate to coaching. So let's talk about the fear factor. So many times in the workplace or in sport, anxiety, fear comes into our body. And I've done a lot of work over the years in helping shift that and helping people manage that. What are some of the ways that a coach can help with fear and anxiety, and perhaps how does that relate to skydiving?
The biggest thing, particularly for me in skydiving, but I think this applies everywhere, is that you need to have a very clear idea of who it is that you want to be. And that may sound cliche, but it is so true. If you don't have a clear, visceral idea of who it is that you want to become, you don't have much drive to get through the fear. So you need to have a really good vision of what that is, and it needs to be very visceral for you. For example, for me, it was wanting to be able to do a women's record skydive. And when the very first time I ever saw this on a TV, I was like, oh, I wish I could be the type of person who would do something like that. But you couldn't probably like drag me onto a plane at that point to jump out of it. But I had a point in my life where I had to shift everything. And it's a long story of how I ended up getting on the plane and jumping out of it. But it had a lot to do with who I believed I was and who I wanted to believe I was. And in crossing that threshold, whether it's a plane door or speaking in front of a group of people or having a difficult conversation, it takes breathing through that fear and visualizing who it is that you're going to be through this and on the other side of it. So I think getting clear about who you want to be is really a huge starting point.
So if a coach was working with a client on that,
yeah,
talk to me about the space between the words. Like, I'm really curious on, I know there's no blueprint. I know you can't just say, okay, well, who do you want to be? Or maybe you can.
It's not that easy.
Right. But
most people just look at you like, I don't know what you're talking about.
that's 100% where I was going with this question.
Yeah.
So intuitively, I think you already know the question that I want to get to. How do we support coaches in unpacking that?
Coming from between the words, like that sort of context, the number one thing that I listen for, especially when I'm in my first session with a client and I'm curious about them, is I'm listening for, what is this person's superpower? What is it that they really care about? What is it that they're really good at? Is that something that they're actively performing in their life, or have they squashed it? So I start listening for that, and I wait for a while before it kind of coalesces into something. And then I may ask a question like, or make a statement or an observation, like, it sounds to me like one of the things that is really, really important to you is XYZ. Like, yes, yeah. How is that showing up right now in your life? So I'm looking for congruency. Are they congruent with what's most important to them or not? And often they're not. So it's like, okay, then we're exploring what's the incongruency there with that. And then you can kind of get into this place, I think, in my experience, where they start to see themselves through another person for the first time, and getting more viscerally in touch with who they really are, and realizing viscerally that they're not actually living that life fully, maybe in parts, but not fully.
So what role does visualization and future pacing and time looping and that kind of stuff? I mean, people might be listening to this and thinking we've already gone into the the woo woo wah wah land, but keeping it real, like, I mean, huge believer in visualization, and if you don't own it yet, let's say you don't own that, who do you want to become and the vision of yourself yet, there are ways to step into that each and every day. It's like I always talk about the onion, building layer by layer by layer, right? Because again, I've only ever met 3 girls where I said you have to step up and win for Australia today, and they could actually do that. That's one every 10 years. So knowing that most of the population don't operate that way, yep, who do you want to become? That person, boom, the next day they are that person.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, yeah, so talk to me about your background with sort of any of those concepts that I mentioned earlier in helping people start to believe and adopt those things that they have squashed. Did that make sense?
Yeah, a big piece of it is, I think, there's a couple different things. One is the conversation of what's important to you, and kind of just mining for it a little bit, helping them mine for it. But also, I have used some techniques of going into the heart space and just like close your eyes, go into your heart. And this thing that you're holding. So I had a client who had, she was just really struggling with her job, and she was thinking about leaving and all the things that go through your head. Like, should I stay? Should I go? And I asked her to just, like, however she's feeling and whatever this thing is that's making her, trying to push her out, go into her heart and see, what does it look like? What is the color? What is the texture? What is, if it has does it have a smell? What are the senses around that? And then, open your eyes, explain, maybe feel with that a little bit, and then go into it and visualize, what is the color, sound, feel, smell of the person that you are looking to become, no matter what job you're in. So it doesn't matter, who do you want to be? And I realize that not everybody can get that question right off the bat, but it's not that far away from the first conversation. It's not that far away. You just got to kind of lead them there a little bit. But everyone's got it from like the year 5, like 5 years old, you were running around like, I want to be a doctor, whatever it was, there was something driving that. And that when I'm listening to clients, that's the vibe that I'm listening for between the words, between everything that they're saying, and with a big dose of intuition as well.
I had a very early mentor say to me, Emma, remember the power of the pause. Because I think sometimes as coaches, we can't hear between the words because we're filling the space with thinking about what we're going to say next. Very common as leaders, managers, always looking to do the right thing. So therefore we fill the space between the words and we miss out on the subtle cues within the body language, etc. So how does one work on that?
I think ultimately, I don't know, the MCC, you were talking about the MCC earlier, is such a, it is a subjective evaluation, but in heart, I think that they're looking for that space, and they're looking for your ability as a coach to flow in the moment with the client. And in order to flow in the moment with the client, you have to have some trust in something. So what are you as a coach putting your trust in? And if you're putting your trust in yourself and your knowledge, you're going to keep doing what you've always done because that's what we know. But if you can put your trust into something bigger than you, and you can listen from that space, then silence actually becomes a natural part of the conversation, because you're actually listening for what's emerging between you and the client rather than the next thing to say. But you have to trust something bigger has the plan, and you don't need to know it.
That's hard to do.
I mean, in effect, it's not hard to do. You just got to let go. The only thing there is to let go and trust.
Yeah.
And so there are ways to build that trust.
Yeah. Go on.
The biggest thing is taking a look at, do you have a spiritual relationship? Whatever it is. You might be religious, you might be spiritual, you might be atheist. Do you have a relationship to the thing that holds all of this together? And if you do have that relationship, that's the relationship that needs to be built, that trust between you and that. And that can be done through meditation, getting quiet, creating space for yourself just to shut up and listen to your inner self, to your heart center rather than your head. To what are the things that are, and this kind of goes back to skydiving, like, what are the things that scare the crap out of you in a session where you're like, oh my God, is this client going to walk away with value? And those are the places to look, of like, okay, how can I, let that go and trust in something bigger? And what do I need to unwrap for myself that makes me closer to my authentic self? So once you build that trust through meditation, through reading, through going through your own stuff, essentially, I pushed myself out of a plane so that I could change who I identified myself to be, which is more of my authentic self. Since doing that, I can have a business because I can do anything after jumping out of a plane. You know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah. So And then I think after we build that relationship at least a little bit, we can begin working with the actual techniques of things like clairvoyance or clairaudience and actually build in psychic. Sorry, I'm going to say psychic techniques here they're real. They work. I use them. And if you can trust them, it is miraculous what happens in coaching sessions. You get to the end and you're like, I have no idea how that just happened. Or, there is no way I would have seen that side of the client if I had done just what I always do. It would have been completely blind to me. But this whole other side of the client came out. It was invited by something bigger because it felt safe, there. So as much as everyone would like to be, the smartest person on the planet, especially as a coach, the reality is when we can ground ourselves here and also have a relationship with something larger, bigger, however you call that, and lean into that, then quite frankly, synchronicities and miraculous things start emerging. And I think that's really, really powerful in coaching. So you can learn it. There are three big things. You need to understand the mechanics of intuition. How does it work? What are we doing in the first place? It's actually a skill you can learn. It's not like this magic wand. Okay. And then the second is learning to discern what is the intuitive information you're getting and what is just coming up in your head. Now, what is the difference between the two? Being able to determine that. And three, being able to communicate it in a way that doesn't freak out your client. Like, I just got a psychic insight. I'm going to share it with you. Like, that's a good way to freak out your client. But taking the information and formulating a good coaching question from it is an advanced way of communicating your intuition in the coaching session, in our coaching parameters as ICF coaches, without going outside of our code of ethics.
Of course.
So those are the three things I think we need to learn.
Yep. Well, a couple of things coming up already. I'm loving just some of these. I just want to recap some of the words that are standing out. Congruency, grounding, space, safety, authenticity, and synchronicity, and trust. So already, like, those themes in itself, I mean, that is, those words are what we do on a daily basis, day in, day out. And it's not easy being a coach, because for you to fully experience those things and the dance between, with you and the collaboration and the relationship with the client, you really do need to be so present for those things to surface. So now seems like a good time, actually. What do you think makes a great coach in 1 to a maximum of 3 words?
I would say love, compassion, and space.
Could you share a story that brings any of those 3 things to life within your work?
I had a client once that her goal was to be more empathetic. I want to be more empathetic. And it's like first session, she was like, empathy's stupid. I was like, oh, but you want to be empathetic, but it's stupid. Can you tell me more about that?
Bit of incongruency happening already.
Yeah, talk about incongruency, right? And she's like, well, my friends, they say that I don't listen, and then I really need to be more thoughtful, and I really need to be more feeling and empathetic with them. But I think empathy is stupid. So I want to be more empathetic for my friends, but essentially it's a waste of my time. So I said, okay, well, that's a place to stand. Let's back out of that for just a minute and talk about really what it is that you want. Because this doesn't sound like something that you want. It sounds like something you think you should have. And so we kind of went with that for a while, and I gave her a lot of space just to process a bunch of the questions. And the whole time I'm thinking, my intellect is like, oh man, this woman needs so much therapy. Like, I don't even know. need to somehow get her to therapy. Just from everything that she was saying, I'm like, am I going to get out of my lane, here? I need to be responsible for that. And by the end of that first hour, she said, I think I can see this now. And I see why my friends want this. And quite frankly, I think I need to go to therapy. I was like, yes. So that's what she did. She went to therapy instead of coaching. And I'm sure it was a much better thing for her because she had a lot of trauma that closed her down early. And that's just not my bailiwick,
Absolutely. Good story.
Yeah.
Happens a lot, doesn't it? People say they want that. Or I love this one. I get this in the workplace a lot where the owner of the company or the manager just says, I just need my people to be more engaged.
Right.
I want to work on how I make others more engaged. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, here we go.
Even the goal itself for those listening needs to be redirected. And obviously, again, cliche as it sounds, but control the controllables. Absolutely.
It's super important to be really, really clear what the actual thing is that they're trying to achieve because they don't even know it. And so that first conversation is often the whole contracting conversation about what the heck are we dealing with here? What is it that you want to achieve for real?
Yeah. Yeah. Playing devil's advocate for a minute. What if someone listening to this is saying, Grace, this is just clairvoyancy and woo woo wah wah, and it's not, it's not for me as a coach. Like what I want to demystify sort of, I guess, some of the labels associated with some of the words we've used in this episode. And certainly I've never gone there before, right? So this is the first time somebody's come on the show with this background and skill set.
Yeah.
Just sort of, we sort of touched on it earlier, but could you sort of let's talk about the power of labels, first of all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And then just sort of demystify it because, as you said, the mechanics are accessible to all. So could you go there next?
Talking about labels, like woo woo is one of the things that people are weird about. And quite honestly, in my experience, we're moving in the direction of reconnecting with who we are. And we have to, because we are not going in a good place, this planet. And in order to pull our butts out of that, we need to connect with who are you really? What do you really care about? What do you really want in your life experience? And what do you want your children, your family to have and their children's children? Because their children's children may not have a planet if we keep going like this. So to some extent, you got to get real with what's actually happening here. You can live in your bubble all you want, right? But if you're going to work with people at the level of transformation, you have to be willing to look for yourself at an extremely authentic, real level. And if that's hard, that's okay. Like, you got people like me that can help you with that. And often what it requires is people working through some of their trauma, some of the things that keep their heart closed. If we want to be high level coaches, you have to work with an open heart. And to have that open heart, you have to work through your stuff. And if you don't want to deal with that, then that's fine. But you're not going to get to an advanced level of coaching. And so when we say woo woo or I say intuition, what I'm really referring to is being really intimate with who you really are as human being, not as Joe, Jane, Jack, as who you are as a soul, as a being, as a consciousness. Get in touch with that. And, I'm sorry, but take it or leave it with woo woo. I mean, it's real. It's real and it works. So I would say if people are like, blah, well, okay, they may not be there. That's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. Or if you want to just try something and see, and you already kind of have a connection, I just like to say something bigger because we all have labels for what that is. And we all have our own personalized experience with what that is. And if you have that connection, one thing you can do right before a session is just sit still, close your eyes, but have something what I call an invocation, which is basically call it whatever I call it an invocation because I'm not religious, but some people may call it prayer. And it doesn't have to be formal. It can be really informal. Mine tends to be a little bit formal just because that's what actually works for me. So my invocation is, may it be with the blessings of the Supreme Being that I provide this service to the best of my ability with love and compassion. Oh, look, love and compassion and guidance from my spirit friends. May, and I say the person's name, and I engage energy for our highest good and leave clean and protected and ready to move forward. I am clear and open at this time. And something happens when I read this every single time. And that is that I get a chill up my spine and I can feel two hands on my back. And that's when I know I'm connected. And my sessions 100% go differently when I do my invocation versus when I don't. It's so much easier to fall into transactional coaching for me without this. Then when I have this, I rest into a trust and it allows it to be transformational in a way that is easy and not hard. I'm not working hard to change the person. It's just the space they are offered to change, and they'll step into it or they won't. In terms of demystification, there is skill involved, but it's also somewhat mystical. People need to get comfortable with that because we have lost our connection with spirit and we need to bring it back.
All right. Well, I'd love for you to land this episode with maybe some of your favorite coaching questions.
One of my favorite coaching questions is, what do you think is really going on here?
Coaches listening, be very mindful of sarcasm when you say the word really. Again, that's the subconscious judgment, isn't it? Wonder what's really going on. You can ask that versus, I wonder what's really going on here. Like, there's a subtlety in the tone too, isn't there? Within that question alone.
It can be, and it depends on the client. It depends on the relationship that you've built with the client. It depends on if you've built a relationship of which we should be practiced at building that safe space. And often when clients are going around and around and around in a circle, I say, let's just back out for a second. What do you think is really going on here?
Oh, nice.
And it is an intense question because it requires them to face the circularness of their thinking.
I like back out.
So
I like back out. It's like, it's a nice way to, sort of pattern break the loop. Really nice. Yeah.
They always answer it like they're always like, I think I'm just scared. Like, okay, let's talk about that. So that's one strategy I use when people are going in circles. And also, if they can't quite land on a topic for the coaching session, you keep asking questions and then they do the circular thing on the topic. So you can't nail them down. One of the questions I ask is, so you brought up this and this and this and this. What's the theme that you see between all 4 or 5 of these things? What's the commonality? And that usually will get to something a little bit more tangible. I mean, I'm a straightforward coach too, with the combination of compassion. So I'm sensitive to how I am straightforward, but I am not going to leave something on the table because I'm too chicken to say it.
I think, again, many sports coaches could really benefit from that last comment as well. So many times, as a chapter 1 of my life, I was a tennis coach. And so there's that transaction of what used to be money through a fence, right? And the parent's paying you and you're the coach. And there's the transaction, the literal transaction of an exchange of cash. Maybe not so much anymore, but still this expectation on the coach that they may be too chicken to sometimes call out what's really going on. A lot of high performance athletes that I've worked with over the years have those psychosomatic injuries because they don't want to face pressure. And this is the opportunity. And if you're listening to this podcast, is there an opportunity there to ask a question? Because you feel it in your gut. Hey, this injury maybe it's not a real injury. It's literally because you don't want to face the battle of competition So going there actually with love and kindness in your heart is doing is being a coach, not doing
Yeah.
the right thing. That's just coaching.
Yeah. It is.
Mm.
Coach the person, not the problem.
Yep. Love it.
Yeah.
I was pausing for
And you did.
effect. I was pausing for effect there. I'm not going to cut that out either in the editing process. Really grateful to have a conversation, from the courageous lion to our authentic self, and yeah, with love, compassion, and space, and all the wonderful things that we back out so that we can look in.
Mhm.
And how can we all make a difference from the inside out, not the outside in? Grace, been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for your time and your energy and your intuition.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
And thanks everyone for listening.
The Coaching Podcast is sponsored by Transition Coach for Athletes, a global coaching, mentoring, and US college sporting scholarship placement service. The service helps athletes navigate the often challenging world of choosing your best college fit while maximizing sports performance. Visit www.transitioncoachforathletes.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating review on your podcast listening device. And don't forget to tell a fellow coach about the show. The ball is in your court to take action and enjoy your coaching.